The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 3. Part 2. The heat was increasing in the environment, spring ended and this gave way to summer. 2 moon changes had passed since Arian had escaped from Caesarea. Her plan to escape north had yielded the expected result, since she found no one looking for her or following her trail. The trip became a very enriching experience for the young woman. To her surprise, she managed with great sufficiency to survive, thanks to the teachings received from Loaf were tremendously useful. Finding food or looking for a safe haven at night became routine, and he discovered that they were tasks for which he had a natural instinct. He traveled along the path he had taken with Loaf to the kingdom of the elves, reaching the Bantara Pass where he could see the great golden oaks that were his border. After she was skillful, she moved between the borders of the elf kingdom knowing that she would be safe there. He came to see the silhouettes of the famous Towers of Oblivion, imposing structures that were lost in the sky, but he did not approach although he felt like it was too dangerous. There could be white robes nearby, since after all it was the original destination of the magicians. Spring progressed, the days were longer and the mild weather favored their escape plans. Once she was more or less sure that she was not being persecuted, she headed south. Then she met the Nose-Minute, a family of nomads from the north with whom she befriended when she helped cure one of her daughters of a serious illness. They considered her a healer and allowed her to integrate into their group. Her healing gifts made her highly prized among the family. He managed to adapt quickly to their customs. So anyone who saw her would consider her just another nomad of the free lands. Such was his rapport with them that they invited him to accompany them to the Northara, the sacred place of the Nose-Minute, where they celebrated the festival of Aurspear, which occurs during the shortest night of the year when the 2 moons cross. The nomads considered this date as their holiest day of the whole year. All the nomadic clans gather that night to worship their strange gods. At the end of the festival, the nomads take advantage of the beginning of summer to trade either with the coastal populations of the east or travel south, towards the kingdom of Beer. The Nose-Minute agreed to help her, and with them she traveled without any incident, camouflaged among them until they reached the northern border of the kingdom of Beer, the city of Xeres. In this city a great commercial activity was concentrated, and at the beginning of the summer all was a melting pot of races and people. To enter the so-called Northern Gate you had to cross a wall built by King Dree II, after the failure of his attempt to invade the free lands of the north. Xeres was located in a flat and wide valley, between the Brown Mountains. It was the natural route of communication between the capital Tame and the free lands. Once the construction of his wall was finished, Xeres began to grow under his protection. Trade between the nomads of the north and inhabitants of the free cities of the coast with the inhabitants of the North Beer began to prosper. Then King Amber the Magnificent came to the throne, establishing a system of tariffs on trade with the north, creating in Xeres a customs house. It also established an entry tax on all foreigners from the north. They had to pay a gold coin for each individual who crossed the wall and the obligation to be registered their passage by the officials of the crown. The goal of the Nose-Minute was to obtain that gold coin so that they could go to Xeres the following year. So either they obtained it by trading the previous year, or those who did not have the currency to pay customs had to trade with the free cities of the coast. Even some of the boldest nomads traded with the distant kingdoms of the west, but very few dared to cross the Great Desert. Xeres greeted her with the Great Dragon Gate, the only entrance to the city from the north. A crowd of people crowded in line. Since in the customs there was only one official surrounded by soldiers, but it was a simple process to give a gold coin, say the name, place of birth and declare the goods with which it was going to trade. Except the iron, everything was allowed. Arian did not raise any suspicion when he came to the dragon columns. He tried to imitate the accent of the Nose-Minute and achieved it in an almost perfect way. The official did not raise his head and only wrote his fake name in the huge logbook. Once inside Xeres, they headed towards a large field where the nomads of the north settled, and that became a large market throughout the summer. Next door grew disorderly the city of Xeres with its stone buildings. The North Hara would be in Xeres for about 10 days, but Arian knew that to reach the southern ports this simple masquerade would not serve him. The nomads did not go so far south of the kingdom of Beer. After 10 days, in which they sold all their wares very well, Arian said goodbye to Noshmin's family who were returning to the northern forests. The young woman decided to stay in Xeres at least for the rest of the summer. In this city it was relatively safe and it was likely that some opportunity would arise to be able to travel south. Although the disguise was effective, Arian made the decision not to tempt fortune and rented a room in one of the numerous inns that existed in Xeres. He chose one of the most famous in the slums. It was called the Table of Ordoni. A huge building of about 4 floors, entirely built with wood, was not only an inn with some fame for those who came to visit Xeres, but also the tavern located on the first floor was well known for the quality of its beer and its famous black mushroom brandy. In addition to other activities not recommended for decent people. It was a place quite tolerant of nomads, which was not frequent in Xeres, and from what they told him about the inn clientele, it was a place where you could establish contacts with people who were not afraid of authority and who did not usually ask questions if the amount of gold was adequate. To find his chance to travel south, Arian used to frequent the tavern until midnight, when it was very crowded. Many of the tables were occupied by card players who either cursed their luck in the game or instead gave thanks to the gods, although professional players knew that the gods had little to do with the outcome in the cards. Others drank in silence located at the bar. Those who sat at the tables without playing talked in small groups of 3 or 4 people who from time to time cast suspicious glances at the rest of the premises, fearing that one of those present would spy on their plans. The only reality is that in Xeres everyone had illegal plans or businesses to declare, since King Amber banned the trade of maritime iron with the free lands of the north. Smuggling was a big business for the inhabitants of the city in the north of Beer. The king's taxes on trade caused many to consider smuggling with the northern lands as a very lucrative option, as profits almost doubled. This activity attracted to Xeres many fortune seekers but also the king's soldiers who pursued smuggling. The sentence was the death penalty. That was the reason why many of the tavern's patrons had quite a bit to hide. Nobody was interested in the royal guard passing through this place, and the truth is that not even the royal guard itself was interested. Arian had been staying at the tavern for more than a week waiting for an opportunity to travel south. Meanwhile, he was trying to discover news about the cities of the coast and the murder of a white-robed magician. But all he heard were the typical incidents of villages being isolated by snow during the winter or attacks by wolves and trolls. Even so, her situation began to be critical, since the gold was running out, and also her loneliness began to arouse the curiosity of many eyes, which wondered why such a young and attractive girl was alone in such an undesirable place. In order not to arouse more suspicion, he tried to go out as little as possible to the market. In addition, he had already sold all his wares and had gold to rent a room at least 1 more month. His room was located at the end of the corridor on the 3rd floor. It had a small window facing a small narrow alley where at night it was normal to hear noises, complaints and fights. The place was frequented by the worst kind of Xeres, but Ordoni, owner of the place, had very good contacts with the royal guard. As long as nothing serious happened and the bribes arrived in time, his inn and tavern would be a kind of oasis within Xeres. Everyone was happy. But Ordoni and his employees had to maintain some order because if the royal guard entered they would arrest any suspect despite the bribes. During the nights of that warm summer, Arian sat at a table in the tavern, the most hidden, next to the kitchen. The gloom of the place together with the heat coming from the kitchen made it an unattractive location for the clientele during the summer. But from there she could observe all the clientele clearly. almost always the same ones who frequented La Mesa de Ordoni. After 3 nights most of the faces were familiar, and even she already deduced her motivations inside the premises. Most were merchants, other card players or fortune seekers who approached this place in search of contacts for their possible future businesses that were most likely clandestine. The movement of people throughout the night was abundant, and many risked their lives for smuggling, especially Arian. The inn was a nest of smugglers, prostitutes, merchants, mercenaries, thieves, tahas, corrupt royal guards and people with other secret goals like Arian. Malt beer was one of the attractions of the place. It was said the best of all Xeres, but also other liqueurs were famous as swan eye liqueur or black mushroom brandy. The amount of drink that was ingested was the fundamental difference. In a week in the local Ordoni understood that it was what made the difference, the professional players or the smugglers of the guild, as they were called in Xeres, only drank a drink or 2 all night, while those who were occasional customers or those who wanted to have a good time drank too much. The consequence of such recklessness was the loss of his money in the hands of the tahas. Arian had well-founded suspicions that Ordoni was in cahoots with professional gamblers and also with smugglers. The activity in the place could be summarized in closing a deal with one of the smugglers and to celebrate drinking a few beers, then investing the future profits in a game of cards where you lose a lot of what you won and end up looking for the services of some of the prostitutes that swarmed in the premises of Ordoni using the rooms on the 3rd floor. If at dawn the subject was prudent and had had some luck, he would have enough gold to return home. All these activities caused extra income to Ordoni. Of course, the women and boys who were engaged in prostitution had to pay him one of the 2 gold coins that cost his services. Ordoni became rich, especially in the summer where the activity was frenetic. Thanks to that gold, surely Ordoni could bribe the royal guard and surely the governor. The royal guard on duty did not approach the tavern. Security depended on Ordoni's thugs, who incidentally liked the tranquility in his premises. Not attracting attention was essential for the durability of his business. A scandal reached the ears of the king would be the end of these lucrative activities, since he would be sacrificed without compassion by the governor of Xeres. As it was evident, the presence of Arian began to arouse the curiosity of the customers of the local Ordoni. She was not a prostitute, so who was she? She could not stay there much longer. The last days she decided only to appear in the living room to only have dinner and then return to her room where she could spy on others without being seen while thinking about what to do with her uncertain future.